Lost Ark is one of the few remaining really hyped AAA MMORPGs coming out in the near future. We have also gotten confirmations that it will be coming to the West, and it seems like they might be taking the self-publishing route, which Smilegate honestly seems well equipped to pull off. However, what's more important is determining whether the game is even worth your time in the first place. I've been playing the game like crazy since open beta began in November, and I have to say that Lost Ark is probably one of the most high quality MMOs I've ever played. But does that even make it good? Or the best even? And does that mean it's worth your time? I'm going to do my best with this video to cover both the beautiful and ugly nature of the game and help give you the information that will allow you to determine whether it's worth your attention and hope. So if you already know about most of the core systems in Lost Ark, or you don't have the time or patience to go through the positives of the game, you can go ahead and skip to the 24-minute mark where I really start to break down my core issues with the current in-game systems. Starting off in Lost Ark, you get to choose from 12 different classes. So in character creation, you pick a base class, and each of the available 4 base classes give you 3 subclass options that you get to pick at the end of the tutorial. In most cases, each class offers very distinct playstyles. The classes currently in the game are the Warrior, which is made up of Berserker, Warlord, and Destroyer; the Mage, which is made up of the Bard, Summoner, and Arcana; the Fighter, which consists of the Infighter, Battlemaster, and the Soulmaster; and then the Gunner, which has the Blaster, Hawkeye, and the Devil Hunter. Character creation itself is also really good, and there's a lot you can do to customize your character. The feel of Lost Ark is amazing. The production value of the game is really impressive. To be honest, if I was only talking about the feel of the game in this review, it'd probably be a 10 out of 10. The game's graphical fidelity is stunning, plus the performance is really good too. The fact that the game is as beautiful as it is and performs as well as it does really just blows my mind, since it's on Unreal 3. Cough bless. Combat is buttery smooth. Movement is very fluid, but it isn't floaty. Most movements seem to carry proper weight. The animations and sound effects just really click with each class theme. However, there is a little bit of visual pollution. I'd say on a scale of 1 to Guild Wars 2, it's probably around a 6 or a 7. Also, crowd control is actually really important when it comes to boss fights. Some bosses can be outright CC'd by certain status effects such as freeze or shock, etc. But even in cases where bosses are immune to status effects and deliberate CCs, they are still invaluable. That is because each boss has a second HP bar that is their break bar. Every skill contributes to break and does damage to this bar. However, certain skills and skill morphs bring more break than others. Most heavy break is attached to crowd control skills, and they can be morphed to bring further break as well. Once you break a boss, they are CC'd and take significantly more damage for a short period of time. When it comes to the environments in Lost Ark, there is a great deal of variance. Plus, they are very beautiful. There's honestly a lot of creative and unique themes you'll come across when venturing through the game. Along with that, there's also insane mob variants. You aren't going to be fighting the same monster types over and over again in Lost Ark. It really does a great job of mixing it up and putting you against vastly different creatures from zone to zone. World travel is also handled pretty well. It has a really good balance of fast travel and slow travel. For example, you can only fast travel to waypoints if you are currently on the continent of that waypoint. Also, some of the routes are expensive enough to make you want to consider traveling by mounts at times. The world travel is also broken up into seafaring between the different continents and the many islands featured in the game. It really seems to harken back to some old school RPG overworld traveling mechanics. You can also travel between continents by taking a charter ship, but if you spam this without caution, it will eventually hurt your pocket. So it's good to get out and sail, especially if you want to save up your shillings, which is your main currency in the game. They honestly didn't just nail the core feel of the game, but to me it feels like they took it an extra mile. There's just so much attention to the small details all over the place, and you really feel like they worked hard on the finishing touches. They just really got a lot of value from little things in the game. For example, in certain dungeons or zone vistas, or even when traversing certain types of terrain in the game, it'll just do very creative things with camera angles that just adds an extra dimension to the gameplay. Some of the dungeons are absolutely impressive. Looking back, the water boss dungeon comes to mind. It was just a really cool fight, and there was a lot of things to dodge, just a lot of stuff to keep track of. Another place that really impressed me was just walking through the dark corridors in the Yin Yang dungeon and seeing the little dragons fly by. and even quirky things like the pirate dungeon, in which you're shrunk to the size of a small fairy, and traveling through the dungeon has you climbing up books and shoes, and it's just really entertaining. If I had to identify a major detractor about the game feel, I would probably have to talk about overworld mobs and trash in dungeons. For the most part, they are pretty much non-threatening. They are just little peons in your way to be utterly annihilated. There are some outliers, but for the most part you will find stupid mobs just waiting for you to blow them into little pieces. I have to say, part of it feels really good. Every single attack you make flinches mobs or mini stuns them. It just really makes you feel powerful and kind of like a deity. However, it needs to be mixed up. There needs to be stronger mobs mixed in that will just fuck you up if you play bad. Also, later on in in-game chaos dungeons, people will just skip the trash up until each waypoint of the dungeon and mow them all down when they are grouped up. I think this is an area that could really use an overhaul and is one of the things that detracts from the current feel of the game. Leveling is handled pretty well in Lost Ark. As noted above, the feel of the game is impressive, so you don't get really bored early on. You constantly see different monsters, environments, and interesting dungeons. The pacing can vary depending on how you handle it. It is a good mix of main story quests, side quests, and dungeons. There are extra things you can do, such as maps, which are kind of like rifts in D3, zone completion, seeds, etc. But most of them are neither effective nor efficient to do while leveling. The low-level maps, which grant you accessories, serve absolutely no value because you will just quickly replace those accessories through dungeons or quest rewards. Basically, there are many layers, but most of them aren't emphasized, which is sad. As I said earlier, there are a lot of really cool and interesting dungeons in the Lost Ark. Don't get me wrong though, there are a few snooze fests, but for the most part there's a lot of variance and they are enjoyable. However, a recurring theme with Lost Ark that I will really hit on in the endgame also shows through in the leveling structure. It honestly isn't built very well for leveling as a group. The main problem is that almost all your EXP gains will come through the story quest progression. Because of this, once you and your friends or guild members get out of sync, you will then pretty much go your separate ways. This honestly isn't a very hard fix though. The gameplay just needs to be broken up a bit. They could honestly reduce the main story quest EXP, put a good chunk of it into dungeons, disperse the XP into maps, make the rewards more valuable and lasting, and give really good EXP for killing world bosses, and bam, it's already a lot better. Leveling is very linear until you hit the level 40 range, then the game opens up a bit. Other than some quest gates, it pretty much becomes pretty damn open as to the order and way you can finish your progress to 50. As for the story quest itself, I would say that without understanding Korean, it seems to be really good. The cinematics are really gripping and engaging. It's honestly like watching a really high production in-game rendered anime. Not only that, there are parts of the story that really just do a good job of putting you into the event that is unfolding. For example, in some of the castle sieges or city sieges, you get to actually play through the siege alongside the cinematic, and you fight super large hordes of mobs, and it really gives you the feel of being a badass soldier on a really large battlefield. There were a lot of times, whether in a dungeon attached to the story or in some of the bigger fights, that I was just a bit in awe at the production value of the game. I just thought I would add this little bit since the game is isometric and has been compared to Diablo a lot. The game definitely borrows from the ARPG genre and has different elements tucked into it. However, I think I would be remiss to classify it as an ARPG. There are very big differences in how itemization is handled, and combat is nowhere close to traditional ARPG spamfest style, which to me is a good thing. I feel that Lost Ark combat blows pretty much all ARPG combat out of the water, so no, the game definitely shouldn't be classified as an ARPG, nor should it be considered a Diablo or Path of Exile killer. It is very much a different animal. As to the question if Lost Ark is worth your time, I think this section will contribute the most towards answering that. In-game progression in Lost Ark has a lot that I love and enjoy, but there are also some major drawbacks. As far as what progression after level cap looks like, I'd have to say it's kind of like a smorgasbord of many different content mediums. There are so many different things to do and crazy amounts of side or alternate progression. I describe the actual core character progression itself to be both extremely linear and extremely horizontal at the same time, meaning that the power dispersion is extremely linear and is mainly handled through eye level and stat sticks. However, the vehicle of delivery is pretty horizontal in that you can pretty much choose which content mediums you want to progress through. For example, you can do all your gearing through PvP as your base, Lifeskilling, island exploration, or guardian raiding. All of these content types can serve as the foundation for your core gear progression, then you'll just have to supplement them with other things such as maps, chaos dungeons, etc. Just like all the different forms of content in the game, gearing and character power is actually pretty intricate, layered, and nuanced. Now I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself, because as I described earlier, it is very linear, make no mistake. Eye level and the influence of stat sticks are still king. However, there are a lot of layers that accompany it, so the way you progress your character starts with armor. Armor, which is composed of raw stats, set bonuses, and runes. The core armor used to progress is crafted armor. You can obtain the mats to craft armor from PvP, Lifeskilling, Island Exploration, and Guardian Raids. This armor is important because it can be further upgraded to increase the item's eye level, as well as some other things. To keep things simple, I'm going to explain things through the frame of Guardian Raiding. In a given tier, you craft your gear with the mats you obtain from killing the first Guardian. Then each Guardian afterwards is used to upgrade that gear to a higher eye level. There's also another component to upgrading that spans all content mediums. It acts as a means to further gauge your progress speed, and that is a Crasium. A Crasium is needed for each upgrade. The cost scales for each upgrade tier, and a Crasium is both limited and dispersed through different content types. More on that later. Because of this, it is usually best to concentrate on only upgrading a couple pieces and then filling in the rest of your armor slots through chaos dungeons, which drop gear, but the catch is that it cannot be upgraded. So you'll continue to scale the eye level of your armor through upgrading and running chaos dungeons to fill in the other slots. The eye level of your drops will increase as your overall eye level increases as well. Upgrading is nothing like that of other Korean games. It simply operates on a star system and is pretty much devoid of any RNG. I don't remember ever failing an upgrade, and I think it is a 75% chance to succeed. Upgrading also slightly increases the raw stats on the gear piece. Then there are set bonuses on gear. There are 2-piece, 3-piece, and 5-piece set bonuses. Each tier has new set bonuses, and so does every form of content. Runes are slots that are available to unlock on your gear. Whenever you unlock these slots, you get a color by RNG, and you can put runes of matching colors into the slots. The gray slot can be filled with any color. With certain materials, you can also re-roll the slots. Each boss has different damage types, different threats such as stuns, etc., and also is weak to certain damage sources. So depending on which guardian you're facing, you can go in with resistances to their damage types built up, you can maximize damage towards their weaknesses, or if they have fatal CCs, you could go in with stun resistances, etc. It's kind of like what Torchlight Frontiers is trying to do with each area in their game, where you build resists towards a certain element or whatever, and then start again with a different type when you move on. That's basically what the rune system is in Lost Ark. Then aside from armor, you have both accessories and your weapon. Both of these are just raw stat sticks and heavily contribute to your eye level. You cannot upgrade accessories, but you can upgrade your weapon. However, most people never do, since it isn't efficient material-wise. In some cases, you can build weapons that do help with your raid tier. For example, with tier 2 mats at the end of the raid tier, you can craft a legendary weapon that converts a percentage of your damage into fire damage. This helps a lot with the first 2 raid encounters in tier 3. Then there's the ability stone, which modifies your HP and also serves as another big stat stick. Rolling ability stones are actually pretty cool though. For example, an ability stone is made up of 4 parts: HP modifier, 2 positive stats, and 1 negative stat. You are not able to use the ability stone upon first acquiring one. You have to take it to an NPC and activate it. In order to do this, you must roll on the 3 stats: 2 positive, 1 negative. Each stone has a possible stat range you can get. There is a stat minimum and a stat maximum. The maximum is what you could possibly gain if you roll it perfectly. I think you get 6 rolls on each stat. The way it works is you start with like a 60 or 50% chance to succeed, and with each successful roll you gain X amount of that stat, but you lose around 10% chance to succeed on your next roll. Whenever you fail, that possible plus X stat is lost, but you gain 10% chance to succeed on your next roll. So the goal of it is to find an ability stone that has the 2 stats you're chasing, and that also has a negative stat you aren't too worried about losing. Then you want to successfully roll as many of the positive while trying to strategically plus RNG luck out your fails into the negative stat. I think it's a pretty cool and fun system. Then there's ring inscriptions. Another part of character progression is collecting skill books. These books are used for ring inscriptions. It's basically an extra talent system that has both general talents that span all classes and a few class-specific talents. These talents are unlocked by finding their required books. Some can be unlocked with just one, some take 20 or more books to unlock. Once unlocked, you can then go to an NPC and craft that talent to one of your rings. These talents are very powerful. You can have 2 talents equipped at a time and they do not stack. There's also ability power-ups attached to armor. This requires gear to at least be 1 or 2 star, can't remember which, I think it's 1. With upgraded gear or gear that is max stars, you can get more out of this system. Basically, you get 2 ability options on a piece of gear to empower. You can then use hammers to re-roll to another ability. This means that you can choose to focus on powering up 1 or 2 core abilities in your build. For example, as a summoner focusing on spear, I can power up and re-roll all of my gear pieces to make my spear stronger. It's a nice additional layer to creating builds. Then there's skill points. This is the last point of power scaling I can think of in Lost Ark, and it definitely is impactful. Lost Ark incorporates both deck building and a 3-tier skill morphing system called the tripod system. With each skill you choose to use, you can invest skill points into it, and when you do this, you can freely choose different morphs for that skill based on how much you invested. You can change these morphs while out of combat. However, to remove invested skill points, you have to respec with shillings. You can also purchase more skill decks with gold. 4 points unlocks tier 1 in a skill, 7 points unlocks tier 2, and 10 points unlocks tier 3. However, the further you go in, the more skill points each point of investment costs. For example, 4 points in is just 4 total skill points. 7 points ramps up to 24 skill points, I think, and 10 points is a 48 skill point investment. This puts constraints on the system so that you have to be strategic with your skill point usage. You start in-game with around 250 to 260 skill points, and there's currently only 300 skill points you can unlock in the world. Unlocking skill points is done through different forms of content: zone completion, chain quests, tower, boss rush, and island exploration. Unlocking more skill points means that you can invest further into your builds, and thus is another form of power gain. Other forms of progression exist in Lost Ark, and there's also non-essential content to do it in-game. However, for the sake of time, I'm not really going to jump into them. Some of these things are content like Tower, which pits you against a challenge on a floor, and when you beat it, you get a reward. Then you go upwards to the next floor to face a new challenge. Some skill points are locked behind certain floors in the tower, so they definitely are important. Then there's Cube, which is a form of group content that is a way of generating both gold and shillings. The gold reward is only significant when you get really deep into the cube. The way it works is your team is put into a room, and you face a certain random challenge. Each challenge is worth X amount of points, and you have to gain X amount of points to unlock the first reward tier, bronze. When you do this, you can either choose to take your loot and leave, or you gamble it all and push onwards. If you die without meeting the next reward tier, you leave empty-handed. Then there's Boss Rush. This content gives you a certain amount of tokens for beating each level that can then be used to purchase rewards from an NPC. There are 2 skill point potions you can get through Boss Rush. This is unlocked at 400 eye level. It puts you against boss after boss each level. You can die, but there are scaling respawn timers, and you are on a timer to defeat each challenge. It gets pretty hard as you go up. Then there's things like boat progression. You can do different things to not only upgrade your ships, but also get new ships. You can add and progress different crew members. Each bring different strengths to your crew. There's a card game that seems overly simple at first, but apparently gains some depth and strategy as you face harder NPCs. You can progress your cards and even invest money into your cards. This is one of the best way to obtain feathers, which allow you to res on the spot whenever you die. There's also some islands with different rule sets, such as PvP islands, and there are even little mini games tucked away throughout all of Lost Ark. Now let's look at crafting. Crafting in Lost Ark is called Lifeskilling, which determines both the gathering medium and the things you can craft. Crafting is important for both gold generation and battle items. In Guardian raids, you are not allowed to use normal potions anymore. You can only use battle items. You have 4 battle item slots, and health potions are one of the battle items you can equip. However, you can only use a limited amount per attempt and can only equip them in 1 slot. You can purchase baby white grade potions off of vendors that heal you for 15%, and you can only bring 4 of them, or if you bring green grade or higher, you can bring 5, and green heals you for 25%. These can be crafted with a life skill, purchased through currency from the platinum fields, or purchased from other players on the AH with gold. I chose hunting, so I level by skill-shotting rabbits with a throwing knife that I can craft higher grades of, or also through setting traps. The best place to get high concentrations of mats is in the plat fields, which takes a daily ticket to run. There's a ticket icon you can see on your upper panel. These are used to get into certain kinds of content: platinum fields, tower, cube, and boss rush. You have a cap of 10 tickets and regen at 3 tickets per day, which if you are constantly using them, you essentially have 3 tickets you can use per day. Platinum fields are basically a crafter's dungeon. You are in an instance with other Lifeskillers, and you go about your areas collecting your mats and also returning a resource that spawns from the thing that you're gathering. For example, if I kill a rabbit, sometimes a stone will drop periodically that grants that whenever I return it to the starting location, it grants the group gathering bonuses and resets the map at different intervals as people turn in, which helps for when there are multiple of one life skill in the dungeon. So if there's a bunch of hunters and we're all killing all the rabbits, whenever we hit certain intervals of turning in the stone, it'll reset the map and we'll have more rabbits to kill. Turning in the 4 total stones gives you more currency rolls at the end of the run, which then grants you life skill currency that can be used to purchase mats for your life skilling gear sets or to purchase potions. The mats you gain then can be used to craft more gathering tools such as my throwing daggers or battle items, and in some cases food associated with your life skill. For example, one of the best battle items hunting contributes is flares. Flares allow you to locate the boss on the Guardian raid map. And this is really important because at the beginning of the Guardian raid, you have to find the boss. With a flare, you can do that right away. Also, at different intervals, based around different mechanics throughout the fight, the boss will sometimes run away and you have to find them again. So flares are really, really useful. I mean, this can be really impactful on both your time spent in the raid and in a tight DPS race can be the difference between succeeding or failing. Hunting also provides rabbit meats, which can craft different foods. One, for example, is a food that buffs your main stat. Battle items are honestly really, really cool. They're impactful in the fights, and they're a way to make crafting really important without making it the typical way of just crafting armor, etc. So what does a general gameplay loop of in-game progression look like? Through the lens of a Guardian Raider, it would be run your 3 Guardian runs in a day. You're capped at 3 souls, and basically the souls are an extra form of loot when you kill a Guardian that give you more mats and more chance at getting other drops. So once you get your 3 souls, you no longer drop souls whenever you kill a Guardian. So you basically have less chance at more mats and accessory drops. Then you run your 3 Chaos Dungeons. This is where you get your filler gear and allows you to continue climbing your eye level up. You will hope to get your weapon drops here since they are inefficient to craft and upgrade. And then accessory drops as well to be your fill-in pieces. For example, you want to focus your upgrading on 3 pieces Guardian max and then fill it in with others. So if I'm upgrading helm, glove, and pants, I will hope to find my chest and shoulders in my Chaos runs. Chaos dungeons are basically reused versions of older dungeons, except they are ridiculously easy and don't even feature the same bosses. In most cases, the new bosses are a breeze. And then after doing Guardians and Chaos, if I happen to have a treasure map, I will run it for Acrasium. You can get 1 Acrasium per day from maps. If I am in need of accessories, I will run it till I get an accessory drop. However, you can only get an accessory drop that is 5 eye levels above your current eye level in maps. This is probably to try and reduce some pay to win aspects, since you can buy maps from other players with gold and people can trade in the cash bought currency for gold. Then I will do my event dungeon for more Acrasium. Event dungeons are basically chaos dungeons, except they add some random condition. For example, you might have a ticking poison debuff that constantly eats away at your HP throughout the whole dungeon run. Or there's one event dungeon where a fire comment might target a random member of the group at random times throughout the run, stunning and near one-shotting them. This forces the group to move to the member, so you split the damage among the group. Still pretty easy and mindless in most cases. You can run 1 a day, and they cost a different kind of ticket you get from your Chaos Dungeons. So you do that to get 1 extra Acrasium there, and then I will do my dailies for your Acrasium as well. You can run 3 dailies per day, and each grants you different rewards as well as some Acrasium. There's a 4 Acrasium cap in total that you can get from your dailies. Then, with my remaining time, I will most likely use my 3 tickets on Platinum Fields to craft battle items for my raids or to sell for gold. You can get away with using them to make gold in Tier 1, but as you get up into Tier 2 and Tier 3, you want to start using them more. Even if making gold, you will use it to buy battle items that prove very useful to your group. This is even more important if you're pugging and hope to not get kicked from groups. If you had around 4 to 5 hours of play Lost Ark in a day, all of this will easily consume 100% of that time. And this is where we start to get into the darker side of Lost Ark. So now we're just going to jump into the core issues I have for the game right now. Eye level is king in Lost Ark. The game can honestly be boiled down to progression for the sake of progression. The system of progression is basically the core content of the game right now. The game works in perpetual eye level intervals, and you basically do the same exact content but in different places at each interval. The only thing with significant variance in this loop is the guardian raids. Itemization has many issues currently. You'll always be looking at your eye level. That is all you care about. Is this drop going to give you a good chunk of eye level? There's really no sense of a drop. Through a large portion of the journey, most of your gear doesn't stick at all. You're constantly shuffling loot. There's almost no point in really investing hardcore into your gear early on, as you can beat pretty much every challenge without doing so. I hear this changes after 450 eye level, but even then, you've already gone through so much content without really utilizing these systems. If I choose to enchant my rings, I might get a much better eye level ring 5 minutes later. Feels fucking bad, man. Gear is just eye level plus stat sticks. Set bonuses, other than chaos sets, aren't even dropped, they are crafted. Plus they are useless beyond their eye level tier. Move on to tier 2. Tier 1 set bonus no longer can be used, nor would it be useful to keep the gear because eye level, man. There are no secondary components to look for, no extra properties to the gear, no passives, actives, etc. No interactions with your builds really on drops. All of this is done through skill books or ability morphing, which skill books are more of a system of accumulation rather than a drop, and then ability stones have nothing to do with abilities. They're just more pure stat sticks on top of pure stat sticks. Then even the makeup of stat sticks don't matter because stats on gear aren't permanent. You can just go to an NPC and re-roll your stats for a small amount of shillings. This is nice in the sense that you feel like you can always fine-tune your character around the stats you want, but it kills any sense of excitement of a drop. In a game of pure stat sticks, you are even robbed of seeing the perfect stat stick drop. Then we have gating run rampant. All of your core progression in Lost Ark is gated. It actually could be better described as gates for your gates for your gates. Understand, I know that gating is important in a vertical progression theme park game. It implements importance of time, sense of growth. You do need time sinks and you do need speed bumps to slow down flow and overall consumption of content. However, Lost Ark takes this to the extreme. It's not even so much bad in the way of how you are held back. It's more the fact that it boils down to daily gating and how that interacts with your daily gameplay. For example, Guardian Raids are capped at 3 daily souls for significant drops, Chaos Dungeons 3 daily runs, Event Dungeon 1 daily run, also need to run the Chaos to have a ticket. Ticket content caps you at 10 tickets and you only get 3 tickets per day, so if you don't use your tickets, you essentially lose them. Dailies are 3 per day. Maps, you can only get 1 Acrasium per day and you only get an accessory drop plus 5 eye levels beyond your current eye level, so only worth doing for daily Acrasium and at different eye level intervals. This is where you start to feel the pains of being a free player, which I must stress, I'm impressed that I have played the game this whole time essentially for free. However, when you examine how much time you can save as a paid player, it still doesn't equate to that much. You can basically pay to complete your dailies, and how much time you can save in the aspect of life skilling and battle items is more wrapped up in how much you're willing to pay, so it varies. You will still need to do your chaos runs, guardian raids, event dungeon, as well as everything else for Acrasium acquisition. So it would feel nicer if I were spending money on the game because I could save some time, but still the amount of gating and time consumption in an actual daily gameplay loop is just really immense. There are also quests at different eye level intervals to do that maximize the amount of Acrasium you can gain. So if you want to be efficient, you will do those as well. I think there are also ship maps and I think shipwrecks for Acrasium too. So you're already gated by the amount of content you can do, which is necessary to a degree. However, since it is loaded in a single day, it consumes a significant and set chunk of your daily time. This is where you start to see aspects of FOMO, fear of missing out, really baked into the game. The game really makes you feel bad for missing a day, because that is a day of potential progress, albeit RNG in the way of what drops you might get, and assured as far as the Acrasium you would have gained and the tickets you're not going to get back. Each upgrade of your gear costs a Acrasium, and with each upgrade, the Acrasium amount needed scales. This acts as a cock block for the already many cock blocks. Instead of just being gated by material acquisition, you also have an external material created with the sole purpose of gating the gates. So if you're a casual to mid-core player but you still want to progress at a decent rate, you will find most of your playtime consumed by these activities, and on a subconscious level it really feels bad when you miss them. Then let's get to Chaos Dungeons, Event Dungeons, and all the other daily content that significantly contributes to your core power progression. These content forms are boring, dull, and not challenging at all. Each Chaos and Event Dungeon is the same shit in a different place. They are taking the assets of older leveling dungeons and throwing useless trash into them, and for the most part, very easy bosses. There is zero threat of failing a Chaos Dungeon. Most are mind-numbingly easy, and the only time you're happy is when they meet the perfect combination of extremely easy and extremely fast. This is trash tier content that demands 3 runs per day, and plays a vital role in your character progression. Same thing with the Acrasium gain. There is no challenging content holding back Acrasium, or there's no challenging content holding Acrasium back. It is dailies, daily map, event dungeon, ship shit, and easy quests. So much boring and easy content is playing a vital role in your character's progression. What's worse is if you want to be efficient, you are forced to do it and feel bad when you miss a day of it. Creating a game where the only cool things of your core power progression loops, guardian bosses, are gated behind hard and less hard eye level entry barriers. And the reason I say less hard is because say you're in tier 2, this qualifies you to enter the guardian raids in tier 2, and you just beat the first boss, but you aren't high enough eye level for the next boss. You can enter, but you will arbitrarily and artificially do 60% less damage to them. And then, so you take a system like this, and where you're gating the cool shit behind set eye level intervals, and then you tell players they don't have to opt in efficient gameplay loops. It's basically against human nature. Yes, you will have your outliers, like one of my guild members who just doesn't care. And I've even talked to them about this, and he was like, well, you don't have to play efficiently. You can skip all those things. So yeah, on a conscious level, that might make sense, but when you're looking at the fact that you're in a social game, so you're already seeing the groups that are really pushing progression as fast as possible, and then you have the added pressures of your actual guild or friends that you play with, in which you all have different play rates, this starts to take its toll and the argument doesn't really hold up. And then there are other outliers like people with very little sense of competition, and to them the world is their oyster and they are just presented with lots of options. But for the average person that is somewhat competitive, or at least likes to feel some focused progress on the day-to-day, it is a subconscious mindfuck. Yes, the sense of progress is kind of an optional opt-in. You don't have to do it. There's nothing won by doing it. The other players aren't actually winning anything, but subconsciously you will always be using the most efficient path as a measuring stick, or at least have the measuring stick of your own group or your own potential efficiency patterns, and you will find yourself wanting to maximize the effectiveness of your play sessions. Thus you opt into the perpetual loop of boring ass repetitive time sinks. Plus in the future they might actually win something from this because there will be world PvP zones and siege PvP, and I think I could be mistaken, but I remember some sort of PvE content being lumped in with the PvP zones, so don't take my word for that one, but things like that will only add to the hardcore feeling of FOMO that already weighs on you in the game. This is where you really start to see examples of developers losing player perspective. Instead of using the systems as tools for the content, the systems and tools start to become the actual content. This is where the masking of the Skinner box starts to really unveil itself. And as a player, it almost feels like a slap in the face. I had these same types of feelings with some of the content mediums in Battle for Azeroth. I don't think it's necessarily deliberate, at least in most cases. I think it is just a lack of perspective. The developers are developing from the mindset of what systems and organization they can keep nice and structured on paper, rather than what actually contributes to fun, fulfilling, and rewarding play experiences. Then there's another phenomenon with the game, and that is antisocial breeding and lack of reasons to group. Never have I ever played an MMO where I would log in, see like 5 or more of my guild members online, and yet none of us were in Discord or voice chat. I honestly would hope that they wouldn't see me, because I would want to do my own content like ranked PvP and not immediately hop into the perpetual boring loop of progression I was feeling crushed by. This led me to start exploring why we were all starting to be so antisocial with this game. One of my guild members, who is also the outlier I spoke about, and is also one of the most content with the game, said it's because there isn't enough group content, and that is the sole reason. However, while I agree this plays a part, this isn't the full picture. So I really started to examine it, and this is what I came up with. Firstly, at a foundational level, there are multiple forms of segmentation implemented in the game's inherent systems. For example, you have eye level intervals that act as the first and foremost factor of segmentation. If you are in a different eye level range, your chaos dungeons and event dungeons will be different. Also, if the gap is 15 eye levels or more, you will also be at a different guardian raid boss. This means it is no longer efficient for you to play together. Then, if you happen to be at the same interval, the next determining factor is what have you completed for the day. If you've already done your chaos and event dungeon, you won't be able to do that together. If you've done your guardian runs, you might do that together because you can still get mats and have a chance for an accessory drop if you haven't already got them. Then the last section is what are you focusing on? If your focus happens to be on obtaining skill points for that day, then you're not going to play together. If it's PvP ranking, island hearts, or zone completion, then you will not be grouping. Upon fleshing this out, I created these bootleg flowcharts to basically sum up the process of whether you'll group or not. So in the first causes of segmentation, you start with, are you the same eye level? If it's no, then you obviously won't be playing together. If it's yes, then you can guardian raid together. Have you done your daily chaos? If the answer is yes, then you're not going to play together. If it's no, then you can do your chaos together. And then, have you done your daily event dungeon? If it's no, then we can do that together. If it's yes, then we can't play together. But then you come to, do you even need your group to do these ridiculously easy chaos or event dungeons? The answer is no. So in most cases, you won't do those together. I rarely did chaos or event dungeons with my group. Then when it comes to lifeskilling, are you part of the same lifeskilling group? So there's two different types of platinum fields. And in each platinum field, there's a different group of life skillers that can go into that plat field. So if you're not part of the same group, then you're not going to play together. If you are, do you have any daily tickets left? If you don't, can't play together. If you do, then you can plat field together. Do you want to push cube or boss rush? Remember, these take daily tickets. So fuck off. I'm using mine for plat fields will be the most logical answer. In most cases, you're going to use your tickets for your plat fields, so you're not going to waste it on that, so you're not going to play together. If the answer happens to be yes, then it's like, did you already use your daily tickets on plat fields or other things like tower? If it's yes, then you can play together. And then no is usually the most rare answer, and then you can do cube or boss rush or something like that together. Lastly, are you progressing alts, hearts, zone completion, seeds, rep, etc.? If the answer is yes, you're not going to play together. And then there's the situation of, hey, I have a map. You want to go and do a map? So you get the group together to go and do a map. You're going to get your daily Acrasium. If you happen to have more than one map, then you're going to get your +5 eye level drops, or 1 eye level drop, 1 ring, 1 neck, potentially, or earring, I guess. But once you do that, they're no longer worth doing anymore today, and you want to save them for the next eye level interval. So you might as well just fucking disband your guild. You're just not going to play together a lot outside of guardian raids and some optional things that aren't efficient to do. It basically feels bad to group in most cases in the game, and in the cases that it is worth it to group, it's not necessarily important, or you'll already have done your daily amount of that and you just actually cannot do it with your group. So when I first opened up on Endgame Progression, I equated Lost Ark to a smorgasbord of content in a sense. That there is a lot of things you can do, and a lot of alternate progressive mediums. However, even though these systems themselves are a mixed bag and are fun to some, not fun to others, even with the most optimistic mindset, you don't really feel like you can play them. The game just doesn't let you play the game. The only way you feel like you could do these things is if you forego your daily duties, or continue your daily duties and confine this other play into really small boxes, or if you just have ridiculous amounts of time to play the game. The game kind of just doesn't allow you, it's like it doesn't want you to play the game. It doesn't want you to do all the other content. Especially if you're trapped by the feeling of wanting to maintain at least some form of efficiency. It's like this. Say you're a Guardian Raider, and you want to continue experiencing each new and cool Guardian. So you're on this perpetual tower progression, each with its own challenges and duties you need to get to the next floor. The game ends up feeling like this, like yeah, if you have all day to play, you can go on and do the things you want to do. You want to progress your card deck or your ship, or you want to climb PvP ranking because you enjoy it. You want to world PvP because you find it fun, but do you also want to stay efficient? Well, you technically can do that if you have 8+ hours of play and you blast through the time tunnel of daily requirements. Even then, you're still not being as efficient as you most likely could if you didn't do those things. You know, a good example is there were days to where, like, okay, it's like I know I'm going to have Sunday completely free, or I know I'm going to have Saturday and Sunday completely free, or I have the weekend to myself. You know what? I'm going to get all these things done in Lost Ark. I'm just going to knock out all these different things. But I also wanted to do some PvP and have some fun too. Man, like, no joke, on those weekends or those days, I would get to the end of them and I'd feel like I almost didn't even scratch the surface of my to-do list. Like, I really didn't get anywhere near as much as I wanted done. Even when I tried to just objectively focus on things, like, it's like I didn't get anywhere, and that just doesn't feel good. So do you only have 3 to 5 hours to play? Well, you can choose to do what you need to do, or you can do half of it, or you could just miss out on that day and get punished for doing something that you actually want to do. The thing is, a lot of this could be fixed if they made a move to weekly caps instead of daily, and if the content you actually wanted to do facilitated itself more. For example, Guardian raids could have actual gear drops as well. They could also do real service to the leveling dungeons and make hard mode versions of the ones you actually ran while leveling, and I hope this is something that they will end up doing. And then there's the case of underutilization of its own world. The game takes you on a journey through a vast world of continents, islands, etc. Then at the end game, it shrinks down to nothingness. Other than if you are focusing on island hearts and exploration, which is still only one aspect of the world, the game shrinks significantly. It's like that big fat piece of bacon you left in the pan way too long. It withers away. That's what Lost Ark is like. It goes from being a really big, expansive world to a city hub with some boards you interact with. It devolves into hub-based gameplay for the most part. There isn't enough to get out and do in the world. So many great assets aren't utilized anymore. Old dungeons are done a great disservice by not being brought back to life with harder challenges and expanded mechanics. Old zones are basically ghost towns meant to just blast through on your leveling journey. No reason to really explore islands outside of the island heart grind. There should be more world bosses that are actually challenging, hard maps, PvP events, etc, etc. As if this review couldn't get any longer, we then have PvP in Lost Ark. PvP in Lost Ark is kinda like Endgame, both awesome in a way and terrible in others. Currently, PvP mainly exists in the medium of arenas. There are some PvP islands, but they aren't a main focus, and as I said, you don't go PvP much because efficiency. Hell, even on PvP islands, people just ignore each other because efficiency. They're just there to get their dailies done quickly, and you almost feel like an utter dick if you kill anyone. As for the arenas, you have 1v1 relay arena, team 3v3, and FFA. The 1v1 relay mode is really cool. It has built-in spectator functions that display a lot of vital information clearly. At the beginning, you get to vote for where you want to start, first, middle, or last leg. Highest MMR wins usually. You then face an opponent, and if you win, you then continue to face the next opponent in line until you're killed. The goal being to eliminate the enemy team. Team 3v3 is pretty chaotic and is handled differently. It is a 5-minute match with a kill counter. At the end, the team with the most kills, or if tied, the most HP, I believe, wins. This has actually slowly become my favorite mode. FFA is a free-for-all between 6 people, and I'm not really going to jump into that. PvP is honestly really high skill cap. It's super fast paced, rewards mechanical skill, and there are ways to track your progress. Each mode shows your win rate, and yes, there is a ranked mode. Sadly, for the preseason, it is only in Team 3v3, and you can only do solo queue. This is where we'll dive into the ugly. Competitive modes. Currently, the only competitive mode is a mode in which you have to play solo. So add that to the list of reasons not to group. And they did have a 1v1 rated mode in CBT, so I assume this will change very soon. And then crowd control and current balance. Crowd control is in a really infuriating and head-scratching place as of now. There are so many CCs in the game, and most skills cause flinching or mini stuns. CCs work like this. You have displacement, which is knockups and knockdowns. You have status effects, which are stun, freeze, shock, fear. And then you have flinching, which is basically hit stuns or mini stuns. When you're in the knockdown state, you can use a rollout that is on a 12-second cooldown. Once this is used and you get knocked knocked down again, you will persist to be ragdolled and are pretty much screwed. When you're CC'd for a certain duration through status effects or receive a certain amount of damage while CC'd, the game will automatically put you into the knockdown state so you can use your rollout, if it's off cooldown. After being hit stunned for a certain period of hits, you will receive hit stun immunity and can no longer be flinched for a short period of time. This is on a 30-second cooldown, I believe. Every class has access to skills that grant them full super armor, which is super rare, displacement protection, and protection from select status effects like stun, freeze, whatever. Shock usually pierces through all of these, and then stun and frost pierce through some. And then you have some skills with flinch resistance, which some classes don't have much of that. Summoner. The dynamic that currently exists is there is a huge disparity in classes with mobility, access to frequent status effects, displacements, and hit stun, and access to the different sorts of CC protections. What happens here is classes like Summoner that have very little mobility, very little reliable hit stuns, slower CCs to land, and very little protection get ragdolled around and feel like they almost can't even, like they're not even allowed to play the game. Because of this, there have been very few Summoners that make it into the top 100, and even then, when they do, they don't stay there for long. Even on classes with the tools, the game can feel really infuriating to play when you're caught, and it results in many let me just take my hands off the keyboard and watch moments. Certain classes with super high skill caps like the Battlemaster, who have an insane amount of tools, are also very problematic because they happen to also have a very ridiculously low skill floor because of the disparities in tools I mentioned above. So far they've tried to make changes and are seeming to strip flinch and abusive tools, but I would rather see a systematic and foundational root cause solution rather than playing whack-a-mole with symptoms. It would also be nice to have more crossover design between both PvE and PvP. They did decide to start splitting PvP and PvP balance, PvE and PvP balance finally, so that's a good change. But it would be nice if there was bar break in both PvE and PvP. This would create more crossover play and would also help alleviate some of the excessive PvP CC problems. The devolution of play leads to feelings for certain classes that you're only somewhat allowed to play the game if you bring the right decks. Build viability for a lot of the classes drastically shrinks, and it really just harms the overall enjoyment of the game. So while I really do enjoy PvPing and I do feel there's a lot I can always work on to improve as a player, the current state of it is just really infuriating, rage-inducing, and can only be enjoyed in small bursts. So Lost Ark is a bit of a mixed bag for me right now. I do think it is worth playing. I think it is worth at least an initial run through. The class design is really good, the gameplay is amazing, and I believe the leveling journey and experiencing the first 2 phases of Guardians would definitely be worth even a $60 price tag, which is with all the frustrations expressed above, I'd be happy to pay a larger entry price and see a lot of the FOMO marketing-based systems reduced in the game. However, while the game is very high quality, polished, and has a lot to offer, if some of the core reward structures don't change, if CC remains the same in PvP, then I don't see it as a game that I will be able to really enjoy long term, which I must stress the dev team has been very active and has been making a lot of changes since the open beta started. So there are chances that a lot of these systems will change, and I really hope they do. But anyways, that's it for the review, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it and this helps you in making your decision on the game.